Hello everybody, and have I got a story for you today? It's got all the classic elements: drama, intrigue, mystery, deception, and supercars. And bringing you this video today is our sponsors, Manual, because, as we all know, men are brilliant at nearly anything. Just ask any man you know. However, there is one thing we are not very good at, and that's asking for help when we need it the most. Manual is an innovative, anonymous and online service created by a team of real medical professionals and designed to be able to get you help with all the sort of things that can affect a man in his life that sometimes they aren't quite confident enough to go and talk to a doctor about. So things from general fitness to hair loss, and if you're not getting enough in the bedroom, they can even help you sleep better too. To find out more about how the service works, please follow the link in the description down below, where you'll be able to see what it is they're all about and even get a special discount on some of their products. So, on to the main video. Allow me to introduce you to the star of the show. This is a 1999 Ferrari 360 Modena, and when it's working right, this really is the supercar dream. You have a screaming, high-revving, naturally aspirated engine out the back, the classic and iconic 6-speed gated shifter in the middle, and when all is right with the world, a clear road ahead of you. Nothing could be better. But the internet will readily tell you that the Ferrari dream is often more of a nightmare, and that's exactly what happened with this car. This belongs to my friend James Dean, who's been on the channel a number of times, and he is terminally unlucky when it comes to buying cars, not just with used purchases, but he's also had a couple of new cars that have also been nothing but trouble. His most recent acquisition was a Ferrari FF, which after 2 months of misery was returned to Dick Lovett from whence it came. He then went back on the hunt and wanted another Ferrari to replace it, but wasn't quite sure what it was that he was actually after. Initially he went looking at F430s, and so we went to go and try one, but at the same time I said to him that it would be worth trying a 360, because there's actually a lot about the 360 I think he'd really prefer, including that manual gearbox, and because of the price differential between the two, for the cost of a manual 360, you'd only be able to get a basic F1 equipped F430. These also, to my mind, sound and look a little bit better too, and there's just a cool thing about the whole 360 experience. I think really this car is now in its sort of peak nostalgia period. People really do love these cars. Now, Dick Lovett did have an example of a 360 that we drove, and it was absolutely sensational. Also in Giallo Modena, but that was a convertible, and it just had a huge amount of money spent on it, going through the Ferrari Premium program and a number of other things. It was an absolute joy, but just too much money and with too few miles on the clock. Because James does drive his cars, we needed something that had been used a little bit beforehand, so the depreciation wasn't going to be too severe. The hunt took a couple of months. We looked at a few different examples in a few different places, and then this cropped up at an ancient civilization themed dealership just outside of London that carries this sort of thing all the time, so it really is their kind of bread and butter. We went to go and look at it, and barring a couple of small imperfections, the cosmetics are quite good, the service history was very good, the mileage was about right at 40-odd thousand, the interior was in very good condition, and everything seemed to be pretty decent. However, the price was simply too high. Now, the car did need a service. It hadn't had one for 2 years, but in that time it had also barely travelled 1,000 miles. Nothing really particularly unusual in Ferrari land. We then struck a deal with them because they offered to service the car for us. However, we thought you don't really want the place selling a car to also be the ones servicing it, because they don't really have much in the way of motivation for finding other issues, and our experience had told us that no matter where you buy a Ferrari from and how much you pay for it, there will be some other problems you have to contend with. So we figured, look, the car's probably going to need a good £5,000 to £6,000 spent on it. It needs a major service, it needs tyres, it needs brakes, needs a couple of small cosmetic items, and we will certainly find something else as well. So we did a deal with them and said, look, we'll take the car as is. It does need an MOT on it, so the MOT will also be able to check over all of the things that we can't. We'd both briefly test driven the car, and it seemed okay, but there is a limited amount you can tell in 2 miles of just going in a straight line on a road you don't know. But it needed the MOT, so that was going to get done, and if that came back okay, we were going to buy the car, take it, and said to them, anything that breaks after that, we will take care of it. Kind of like a trade sale, we will be happy to take the risk if we get the lower price on the car. Fine, deal done, hands shaken, and that was the plan. The car got its MOT with no advisories, and that didn't really raise any alarm bells because for the past few years all of its MOTs had also been no advisories. The car had previously spent some time in Northern Ireland, and over there the MOT centre is actually run by the government, so getting a hooky MOT is pretty much impossible. That was another factor that actually made us want the car, because that meant for those few years at least it really had been kept in very good condition. The finance deal was done through a company that neither of us had ever used before, Supercar Finance, and I have to say I cannot tell you enough nice things about them. They were absolutely excellent from start to finish, and I would happily recommend them to anybody. The car was collected on a Monday, and that's where everything went a little bit Pete Tong, because the car didn't actually even get home. The exact order of things we don't really know. However, just before it got back to James's house, the water pump decided that it no longer wanted to pump water. It seized, the water pump pulley sheared in two, it took out two of its own belts. We believe they may have actually been the cause of this, because later on it turned out that one of the belts fitted to the car was actually the wrong size. Now, at this point, I think a lot of people would lose their rag, scream, shout, and just throw the car back at the dealer. However, James is a man of his word, and we'd said to the guys that if anything happened to the car that was simply a stuff happens scenario, we would take care of it. That was the deal, and indeed that's what we were going to do. We were going to deal with it ourselves. I say we, I mean him. I haven't got any financial investment in this car whatsoever, but it's better for storytelling purposes. The truth is that had the previous owner simply driven this car another couple of 100 miles themselves, it would have happened to them and we would not have had any of the issues. It turned out, though, that in some ways this was quite fortuitous, because what we did was we arranged for the car to be taken straight over to Dick Lovett. They wanted to help out because they felt bad about what had gone on with the FF, so they very kindly gave the car a full inspection and provided us with a quote. And here's where it gets really interesting, because I have here the quote. Now let me give you a highlights reel of some of the things we found in the 8 pages of quote that they sent. The rear centre brake light was non-functional. The near-side rear hub bearing was moving in a way that would be considered dangerous. The offside washer jet was non-operational. The rear under tray is damaged beyond repair and not properly affixed. The near-side front upper ball joint play was excessive. The near-side front track rod play was excessive. The exhaust was blowing internally, so it cracked along the seam, quite a common 360 thing. Near-side and offside lower ball joints had play in them. The rear ball joint had a split gaiter. The handbrake efficiency was poor. All of the discs were corroded and at end of life. All of the springs were corroded. The anti-roll bars were corroded. The offside front drop link was seized, and the air conditioning pipes were corroded too. And that says nothing about any of the problems that the car had already encountered. The significance of that list is that they are all items that should have been either advisories or failure points on an MOT. The MOT that was conducted 24 hours earlier. At this point in time, I urge you to remember that not only was this car sold by a dealer who are involved in these kinds of cars all the time, but in their own words, they have a fully equipped workshop able to do more or less anything you would need to one of these cars. Any sensible car dealer would have run this car through the workshop before they even bought it themselves, just to check it was in the condition that they had hoped. And this left us with a little bit of a moral dilemma, because clearly the car had either never gone through their workshop and been inspected, in which case they were simply ignorant, or it had gone through their workshop, they knew it had a load of problems, and they chose to ignore them. We will never know which the truth is. But more than that, the car had then gone on to get a clean MOT that it definitely did not deserve. I reported the test centre to the DVSA because it was quite clear that for whatever reason they had not done their job. But what then is the moral dilemma? Because it would have been very easy to simply reject the car, return it from whence they came, and with all the evidence that we had, that would not have been an issue. Car very clearly missold. However, here's the problem. Any sort of dealer that would be happy enough to sell a car in this condition to anybody is also the same kind of dealership who, when they get it back from said customer, would simply clean it, put the price back in the window and shove it out front and wait for the next sucker to come along. And James and I think that that is very wrong indeed. So we decided the right thing to do would be the noble thing to do and break the cycle. Like I said, this car was bought knowing that quite a bit of work would have to be done. We had a good discussion about it and decided that this was fundamentally the right car for James. It's in the right specification, it has the right mileage, it has the right colour, and it is generally in quite good condition cosmetically. Even the mechanical side, once all said and done, wasn't actually that bad. The initial quotation from Dick Lovett to fix this car was around £14,000. But that was a very rough quote, did involve the doubling up of quite a bit of labour, and I urge you to remember a couple of things. First off, if you have an F430 with ceramics on it, £12,000 is about the cost of doing your discs and pads all round. And Seen Through Glass has just spent a similar amount of money restoring his car, which is, by all accounts, in excellent condition. Very easy to forget that this car is only 2 years off its 25th birthday. They are highly strung performance machines and they do require some maintenance. It just so happened that this one required a bit more than most. Our theory about the integrity of the dealership was also proven when we got back in touch with them. We decided that the fairest thing to do would be to ask them to contribute towards fixing all of the items that had been an MOT failure. In other words, all of the stuff that we shouldn't have had to have dealt with. The rest of it we were happy to sort. We did the maths and worked out that at a conservative estimate that was going to be about £3,000. Now bear in mind we are asking for £3,000 off an initial £14,000 quote to deal with things that had been essentially hidden from us to begin with. And would you know it, they tried to fight us on that one. We knew that something was suspect the moment we spoke to them, because the first thing they said when we went through the list of MOT failures was that must have happened after the MOT. Now, I'm willing to accept that one or two things can go wrong when you get into a car. The LED lights at the rear, for example, failing on the way home, it's not impossible, but it would be rather unlucky. For the entire list of errors to have happened on the way home is stretching it just a little bit. I somehow doubt that all of the springs and anti-roll bars took Monday afternoon to corrode. Simply not the case. This is the bit where Supercar Finance came in and were absolute stars, because they talked some sense into the dealership and got them to agree to write a cheque for £3,000 to cover some of the work. Now, Dick Lovett's quote had been just a little bit too high, so we spoke to Meridian Modena, gave them the same quote, and they reckon they could probably do the same job for just a little bit less. The reason for that being that Meridian do have a special labour rate for their classic cars, whereas Dick Lovett do not. They were also happy for us to supply some of the parts, which we sourced from Superformance. I got no special discount or anything from them. In fact, I couldn't even use Ratarosa's free shipping code because the amount of stuff we ordered was far too big and heavy to do the free shipping on. But the bad news didn't want to stop, because as Meridian began to pull the car apart and start to investigate, they found even more evidence of a lack of care. The drive shaft on the rear had been fitted so poorly that it had absolutely minced itself, and that was another expensive item to replace. The brake pipes had corroded to the point where they required replacement too, and that's the first time Meridian say they've ever had to do brake pipes on a 360. I started to get worried because there were also a few things with this car that didn't seem right to me. For example, a lot of ball joints had to be replaced, and yet in the car's paperwork about 5 years earlier, but only a few thousand miles, the ball joint had been done. I began to worry, was this invoice a fake? Did this car have a dodgy service history? Had it been clocked? Was it actually on many more than the 40-odd thousand miles that we were promised? I spoke in great detail with Meridian about the car and they said, nope, nothing quite so grand. All that's likely happened to this car is a simple combination of a lack of maintenance, and then when it has been maintained and things have been done, it's been taken, we suspect, to some places that don't really know what they're doing at all. And those visits we probably don't have any history for. That's why we never really suspected anything of the sort. All of the paperwork we have for this car is from relatively reputable specialists. The sad truth with this car is that there is no grand conspiracy. There is no evidence of hidden and bodged accident damage underneath. It hasn't been clocked. It has, for most of its life, been really well cared for. But unfortunately, for some of its life, it also was not. And the 360 is one of the last Ferraris that got really quite cheap. These were down to about £35,000 to £40,000 at one point. And because of that, many of them did go through a period where they weren't maintained in the way that they should have been. Sometimes that sort of stuff comes back to visit an owner fairly quickly. Other times it can take years, and we seem to have just been quite unfortunate with this one. Like I said, we could have chosen to simply return the car and got all of the money back, but we were in a position to be able to do the morally right thing. And to me, that's the sort of thing that you should do if you have a car like this, because as far as I'm concerned, all exotic car owners do have a duty of care. The internet is a particularly difficult place to get a balanced opinion on anything, especially something like a Ferrari. People will either tell you it is the direct descendant of God, or a total scam, an absolute waste of money, rubbish when new, even more rubbish now, and simply not worth your time or money. Owning a Ferrari is a complex business, and I've tried to do as much as I can to try and demystify the whole process. Even still, there is, I promise you, a real magic about owning a car like this. And the one thing I feel when I drive my own car, or when I see my friend driving his, is a sense of pride. Because not only is it something we can derive immense satisfaction for ourselves from, but the best bit, and I say this a lot because it's true, the best bit about owning a car like this is sharing it with others. It is the reason I started a YouTube channel. I had access to a few nice cars, and I wanted to be able to share that with the whole world, because by doing so, I hope that our passion will continue long after we have finished. If, for example, you had a Golf R and you tried to tell me it was better than a 360, I'd probably agree with you. It's got more space inside, it's got a bigger boot, although the boot on these is actually very good, much cheaper to buy, much cheaper to run, much more reliable. But that's not the point. This car makes you feel a way that a Golf R never will. And for anybody who's ever thought that cars are an antisocial thing, you have obviously never experienced the joy of letting somebody sit in your car. Doesn't matter whether they're 7 or 70. If somebody looks at your car and wants to sit in it, as far as I'm concerned, you are duty bound as an exotic car owner to let them. Because for nothing, for absolutely nothing, a few seconds, a minute or two of your time, you can make somebody's day. And to me, that makes all the cost, all the hassle, all the expenditure, and all the misery that can come with owning a Ferrari absolutely worth it. And beyond that, you also have a duty of care to the next person. It's one of the watch brands, I'm sure people in the comments will tell me who, that says you never really own one, you simply take care of it for the next generation. And I try and have a little bit of that philosophy with my own cars. I don't ever want to sell a car in a condition that I wouldn't want to buy it. It has meant in the past that I've lost quite a bit of money on some of my cars because I haven't been as ruthless as other people would be. But it's very important when it comes to something like this, because I want the next person who owns any of my cars to be able to enjoy it and have a really good time. I don't want the first thing that happens to them to be getting a really large bill, because that can permanently take the enjoyment out of a car. And if you can't enjoy something like this, then it is worthless. Although James has now put a lot more money into this car than he originally hoped, he does intend to keep it for a while, and he certainly uses it. And that's good news, because it means that over his entire ownership, hopefully the total cost won't actually be that bad. So there we go. That is a tale of woe, but with a somewhat happy ending. And if you're going to take anything from this, yes, Ferraris are complex cars. There are a lot out there that do need a fair bit of work. And I suppose the real moral of this tale is, no matter how good you might think the car is, get it checked over by somebody that you trust, because it would appear that looks can very much be deceiving. No real surprises here. I was just shocked by the extent to which they were prepared to go. Hey ho, can't win them all. For now, thanks for watching. Please like, comment down below, subscribe if you haven't already, and we'll see you for the next one. Bye bye.